everyone, Mandy Friedman here, licensed professional clinical counselor, clinically certified domestic violence counselor, clinically certified trauma professional level 2, the creator of SNAP, survivors of narcissistic and abusive personalities, and the owner of Claremont Mental Health. I'm here with my brother, Andrew. Hi, Andrew.
Hey, Mandy. It's good to see you again, and we're talking today about Connor Roy in the show Succession Season 1. I'm excited to talk about that.
Exactly. We are Season 1. Connor Roy, and ever since I started watching the show and I met him, I've been like, I can't wait to talk about Connor because some of his scenes are just so outrageous and some of the things that he says are so outrageous. So we're going to go over just a few of those things from Season 1 and Connor. But Andrew, I just wanted to ask you, what has this experience been like for you so far? I know how many times have you watched the series now?
I think like 3 total, maybe. But then again, the editing process allows for some more, visualizing, let's say, of the show here and there. But, I like the show a lot still. And I like talking to you about stuff like this. We've done things like this in the past. So for me, it's not really about Succession. It's about doing cool stuff on the internet with my sister.
And for me, the same. I get to combine 2 of my favorite things in one project, and that's hanging out with you and talking about narcissistic abuse, abusive relationships, targets of abuse, survivors and recovery from abuse, and everything that goes in with all of those situations and aspects of abusive relationships. And what better examples than in the show Succession? So, Connor, can you give us just sort of like a brief, synopsis of who is Connor? What do we know about him right off the bat?
Connor's a fascinating character because on the surface, he seems like the most normal guy. We'll get into why that's not necessarily the case, but he is the oldest of the children. He does not seem to be that way. And in fact, he has to be reminded that he is on his own, which is kind of interesting. But he was an unplanned child from, Logan's maybe first or second wife. I'm not sure. But he has a different mother than the other children. So he's kind of an outsider in the family a little bit because of that. And he's not directly involved in the family business, which is something that comes up right away in the show because he wants to get involved and he believes he has what it takes to do that.
And more. A lot more. But there's a lot of people like Connor that think that they could have that job too. Now, if we meet Connor, that means we meet Willa. Who's Willa?
So Willa is Connor's companion, I would call her. And she is a companion of the concubine variety, it seems, where basically he is paying her to be his girlfriend. But that's a very interesting relationship. And I know we're going to get into it in the future more, but he genuinely seems to care for her, and maybe he doesn't, but he really does. And I think if you were going to date anyone in that family, I think that Connor might be the one to go with. The least damage, is going to come to you, I think, if you hang around Connor versus the other children. Just my opinion.
I like his house out in New Mexico. Pretty nice. Where they have the fake family therapy.
Oh, we're going to get into that a little bit.
Oh, I can't.
That stuff is tremendous. But what do you think about Connor when I say that Connor is kind of a normal person, it seems, on the surface?
Well, I think that one thing that makes Connor seem more normal is that he's not exactly in the family in the ways that the other siblings seem to be. He has grown up in a separateness. He hasn't grown up within. So he's kind of an outsider, and he likes to also present himself as an outsider in a way. He wants to be in, but he also likes that he's out at the same time. And I think that's one of the reasons why his relationship with Willa works for him. So Willa is a sex worker, and apparently she spends enough time with him that it looks like it's a dating relationship to the outside world. But that's safe for him. That's a safe, approachable, intimate version of intimacy for him. And we'll talk about why that's a safe version of intimacy for him at a later time, because we learn more about him as the seasons go by. But Willa goes through her own developments throughout the series, and I'm going to specifically speak about her in our episodes that are focusing on the group dynamics. So ahead of us, we still have the Sharks. That's the Stewie and Sandy, Carl and Frank. And then we have the family dynamics and how that group comes together. So we're going to speak about those group dynamics in the future, and Willa will be a part of that. When we first meet Connor, it's when his dad has had a stroke, and I believe he shows up at the hospital with Willa, and he appears as a peacemaker. And I believe that he even refers to himself as a peacemaker. But then at a certain point, this is a quote, direct quote from Connor, and he's referring to Kendall and Kendall's attempt at a takeover while dad has just had a stroke. And what Connor says about himself is sometimes the peacemaker has to go and shoot a maniac on the perimeter. And he's talking about Kendall. He's talking about his own brother. So he's a peacemaker who's also willing to kill people, and sees that killing is a necessary element of peacemaking. These are already these first ramblings of his greatness and how he could be a big, huge leader someday, right? That, you know, the peacemaker also has to be a murderer sometimes, or has to protect in a way that seems like that they're not a peacemaker. You brought up how that the kids were named, or at least Roman was named after, you know, a society that's known for their military prowess, and that Logan likes that stuff. Well, here we have an example of Connor understanding that that's part of your role in the family, is that you might have to put down another family member, or that it's your duty to protect the family against other family members.
Yeah, he is. Not only is he talking about being a peacemaker in this like fighting for peace kind of way, you know, which is an oxymoron, but he also is pitching himself as the leader of the company.
In the last episode, when we were discussing Roman and Connor, we were talking about how that, you know, Roman's abuse as a child, and how that's perceived differently by different family members as a way of minimizing that abuse. And Connor, we mentioned, is in the car with Logan. They're on the way to this ball, and Connor is reminiscing and nostalgic about the ball over the years and them as children coming to this big important ball. And he quotes his dad as having said these things about the people around them that made Connor feel like that he was kind of an adult and in the know, but it was also really, really inappropriate. So he's in the car talking about previous experiences at the ball, and he says, you know, Dad, you used to say to us things like, he's sleeping with her, and he really screwed up, and he's going to be in trouble for that, and she's a whore, and boy, what a slut she is, and man, that was such a great time. You know, he remembers these moments with his dad where things were completely inappropriate, but remembers it as loving, tender moments.
What we talked about earlier is that Connor sees himself as an outsider, insider, kind of at the same time. And isn't that interesting that his father talking trash about all of his peers is what Connor thinks, oh, he was letting me in. He was letting me in, you know, and I was on the inside there. Poor kid.
And we don't know how many years this has been happening, but we know that this year Connor is in charge of the event planning for the ball, or at least he's walking around kind of acting like that he is. And so that's a big deal for him that he gets to be the event planner of this ball, and it has to be perfect because he remembers as a kid looking around going, oh, I'm at the ball. Well, now he gets to be the event planner. And we have two scenes that happen that are just fabulous in illustrating Connor's personality. He gets kind of manic at times. We see some aspects of manic behavior and manic thinking coming from him. We see delusions and delusions of grandeur. We know that he is an overt narcissist and a malignant narcissist. We know how he got this way too, and we're going to get further into that later on. But He's so excited about this ball and being in charge of it, but something happens and it's a big deal. It's a very big deal.
Well, Mandy, they spent so much time and effort getting the perfect bread at the perfect temperature. They're at the perfect table with the perfect table knife. And there's one thing that will destroy bread, and that is frozen butter. And his reaction to this is a little extreme. It is hilarious, but what I love about this whole sequence is that he goes through this incredible range of emotions over butter. It is fantastic. But it's important to him because in his mind, he's proving to everyone around him that he knows what the hell he's doing. And that, this is all, I can clearly do this, so I can do more, like run the company or run some other place.
Exactly. Now, during the ball, we see him kind of checking in different areas on things, including what the teleprompter is going to say when Kendall stands up to give the speech. And we see that there is an announcement that Logan is retiring. So then we have Connor go to the side of Logan. Now Logan's sitting next to Marcia at the table. Marcia is trying to butter her bread. And Connor says something along the lines of, hey, just thought I'd let you know, wasn't sure, like, there's a big announcement tonight, right? Mm-hmm. Logan's like, what do you mean? He's like, well, Kendall's announcing that you're retiring. It's like, he is. So he rats Kendall out that that's what was going to happen on the teleprompter for Kendall's speech. But what's funny is that, Connor's sort of like agitated, irritated. He walks away, and then Logan says to Marcia, what's he on about? And Marcia's like, the butter's frozen. And, it's like, this is an actual problem. She's like, she agrees, like the butter should not be frozen. So he goes into the kitchen, and here's the scene where he is firing everyone and, really going nuts because the butter is frozen. He's freaking out. I love the woman who's the actual event planner, who did all the work probably and who has experience planning events. And you see her sort of like face the staff. And I love how she handles it. She's like,
that's one of the only times in the whole show where someone who is in the service part of the world that they live in actually, she doesn't have a line, but she's got actual agency and she knows what's going on. Well, I guess that kind of parallels the whole thing where, Kendall didn't know how to make a freaking cup of coffee. So, it just kind of parallels that same thing and shows that Connor is completely clueless too. And he wouldn't know how to defrost butter in the first place.
Exactly. Right. But he knows that everything has to be perfect. And if it isn't, some heads will roll. Now, things go well with the ball, as it turns out. Daddy gets up, he gives his speech, he kills it, crushes it, embarrasses Kendall, announces that Tom is Tom is engaged to Shiv. And, so now that's out, that Tom's part of the family now. That was a big surprise that Logan said that. Then Connor has a whole different version of himself that shows up in the kitchen and is high-fiving everyone and saying, what an awesome job, you guys. Awesome job. It's like, what a roller coaster. What a roller coaster he is.
I've worked for people like him. I've found myself like him at times, where I've realized I've acted this way, and it's embarrassing when you freak out about something and it turns out to be nothing. That's kind of the normal experience. Now, he is, of course, taking it way, further than the normal person would experience. But it's I've worked a lot in the restaurant industry, as you have as well. And I've experienced these things, exact things, where someone comes in who wouldn't know, a manager who is not operationally strong, we shall say, who sucks at their job basically, but comes in and starts screaming at everybody about something that they don't even know what they're talking about. And you just kind of go, yep, gotcha. And you just kind of weather the storm. And by the end, they're high-fiving you, hugging you, telling you thank you so much. So it's an experience we can all kind of, we all know about, I would say.
But the thing is that he's not embarrassed and doesn't even seem to notice Like everyone else is like, whoa, but this is just another day for Connor. This is just how emotional he gets, I guess. Another story about Connor that we learn of, we don't see it happen, but Kendall is on his way to Connor's when they're going to have that get together where they're having the fake family therapy. Kendall stops at a bar on his way to Connor's house. Now he's been sober, and he's definitely dabbling in not being sober anymore, and orders a drink, but people recognize the name on the credit card, and so becomes well known that now this is Connor's brother Kendall in the bar. And they tell Kendall a story about Connor coming into the bar with a dog that was dying, and like begging people to take the dog because he couldn't handle watching the dog die.
He wanted to pay people to take that problem off his hands, and that's kind of what Kendall does too, a little bit in that scene as well. So
right, he can't handle it. He wants to pay someone off, like, here, you do the real life stuff, I can't do this real life stuff. And then from there Kendall knows exactly where to find people that are going to give him what he wants. And then so anyway, I thought that was really interesting in terms of, we talk about like empathy or having a lack of empathy. When a narcissistic person who generally doesn't have to deal with normal human being emotions experiences those big emotions, they don't do well with it at all. They can't handle it. They think it's gross. Actually, they have this feeling of like that their butt's hanging out, like it's just not dignified to be a normal human being. And so that's why we pay people to raise our children. That's why we, don't make a cup of coffee. We don't do the regular normal human being stuff. Why? Because the people that do that are not real people. Remember, like, not a real person. Those are the service people. And so Connor would not want to be down with the lowly service people, right? He would want to be above it all. But really what it comes down to is that he can't handle those emotions and doesn't want to feel them. So if I could just out of sight, out of mind, someone else can take care of the dog. But don't forget that the dog crate, the dog pound game that they played with Roman. We learn about that during Tom's bachelor party. That's when that gets discussed. But here we have them really abusing Roman as a child and treating him like a dog and putting the dog in the cage. Grow up, fast forward, Connor says that's not what happened. Connor says that Roman wanted that. Roman liked it. He immediately says, oh, he loved it. Roman loved it. So here we have the child in a cage being treated like a dog, and that's okay. We have no remorse or guilt about that at all. Don't even remember it. Narcissistic amnesia, remember? Fast forward, now we're an adult with an actual dog, and we can't handle the dog passing away. So you can handle brutalizing your own sibling and treating them like a dog, but you can't handle an actual dog. I just thought that was funny how that, again, we have these kind of wildlife metaphors and animals coming into things, and this is just another one. So he's delusional, delusions of grandeur. We're going to see a lot more of that as it comes. And I also want to introduce, which for my audience that has been watching my stuff, this isn't a new term, but for those that are new to the topic of narcissistic abuse, is the concept of word salad. Word salad is what narcissistic people do, manipulative people do when they're trying to sound like that they're saying something, but they're not actually saying anything. And we can see loads of examples of this coming from the White House from, 2016 until 2020, and the time before and after. Pretty much anything coming from Donald Trump is usually word salad. So those are really good examples. Politics aside, he's just really good. He's the best at word salad. No one is as good at word salad.
People are talking about it. Very important people are talking.
Very important people talk about his word salad and how good he is. But actually, Connor's the best word salad person. And here is one of the very first ones. And if you wanted to go find this, it's in season 1, episode 10. And here's what he says. And it's talking about him wanting to be president. like while we're talking about delusions of grandeur and Trump. Here we go. Well, I would launch a campaign against the great dangers. Honestly, this is from my readings, and sadly, you can't say this because the permitted public debate has shrunk to the size of a fucking nut. But frankly, usury and onanism, unsecured debt, and masturbation, the spilling of good seed, it's not for public consumption. I mean, this is from my readings, and I don't want to pay tax.
That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't.
None.
It means nothing except that he doesn't want to pay taxes. That's the only thing in there that meant something.
You put him up on a stage in front of the right people, and they're all going, yeah!
Mhm.
You know, it's like he said nothing. He literally, it's garbage. There's not a bit of information here. But he'll get plenty of people to vote for him somehow. Did you hear that speech he gave? It was amazing. As we're watching HBO's Succession through the series, all 4 seasons, be watching out for more of his word salad. And also, Connor starts to really reveal more about the dynamic of the family along the way. One funny thing that, well, it's not funny, but on this show, things are funny that aren't funny. When they go for their fake family therapy, don't forget the dog kennel, the dog pound game, remember? Okay, so as they're getting ready to enter into the therapeutic environment, Roman says to Connor, I'm going to tell the therapist that you molested me as a child.
Right. And Connor's like, no, don't say that.
I mean, he is not finding it funny at all. So we have not a guilty conscience that he necessarily molested someone, but he's got a guilty conscience that he did do something harmful to somebody in their youth. Perhaps the dog pound game that he participated in, Connor, you know, he might have been a perpetrator of that game and now has to tell himself, oh, Roman liked it. So when Roman is like, oh, well, it's a tit for tat with these people. So you know that's what Roman is thinking about when he's like, you know what? I'm going to just go ahead and tell him you're an abuser, because you are.
Roman's my favorite. That's why he's my favorite, because he effortlessly kind of like cuts right to the meat of something with very few words. He will say something that cuts right to the heart of somebody. It just strikes fear into their heart. And he does that with Connor because, you know, Connor has these plans. And something like an accusation like that, whether it's true or not, would screw up his plans. And like you said, he also feels guilty about the actual abuse that he was involved in. So that is a tremendous observation. All right, Mandy. Well, it was a blast talking about Connor Roy, and we will again bring up the subject of Connor Roy in the future. But next time we're going to be talking about Shiv's man, Tom Wamsgam, and probably a little bit about Greg, too. So I'm excited to talk about that. He is a tremendous character, and he does a bunch of funny stuff.
Tom, the pain sponge. Tom is a pain sponge, and he is my favorite character. So I would expect that throughout our series that we're presenting, all the episodes that we're going to do, that I might get a little bit more excited about the ones with Tom, because from the very beginning, I've been like, oh, I love his character so much. He's the best.
It'll be fun to kind of discuss him as a true outsider coming into the family as well, and what function he serves in the family, because that's one thing I find interesting about Tom is that he kind of like, he's a pain sponge one day, but he's something else another day. He's whatever they need him to be. And it's fascinating.
He's a chameleon. And that's one of his superpowers. That's for sure. I can't wait to talk about Tom. See you next time.
That's why Roman's my favorite, is because he effortlessly, how the fuck do you say that word?
You should leave that in. Don't edit that out.
Oh, that's going out.
Because it's effortlessly.
That's why Roman's my favorite, is because he effortlessly.
I'm saying you should leave it in because it's hilarious.